Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to today's conversation on Gift Healing TV. I'm Sara Jane, and this is one of our series of, sorry, I've gone blank, selfish or harder to manipulate, with the authors of I Didn't Become Selfish, I Became Harder to Manipulate. My co-host, Scott. Hi, Scott. And our guest. Now, we were going to have two guests, and Jessie was here, and now something's happened with her computer, and she can't get in. So, Jessie, we miss you. But our other guest is Michol Mae. Michol, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. I love chatting with both of you.
It's a real pleasure. We have such wonderful chats. Michol, share a little about yourself. Now, your chapter was, I'm going to have to scroll down. Your chapter was chapter 8.
Yes.
They just needed more love. My cup wasn't empty. It was broken. Share a little about yourself and why you chose to actually join this project.
So I have had a history of making curious selections in my partners. Without really fully understanding where that was coming from. And at the time that I joined your project, I was recovering from the last relationship that was very, very much incompatible with me. And I had tried to learn, all right, what is a healthy relationship? What does that look like? What am I doing wrong? Where am I going? Which places? And so I wanted to give some of that back to whoever might be reading that book because I learned so much in my journey.
Bless you. Thank you. And share a little about yourself, not just the book, but share a little about you. What do you do?
Goodness, I do. So I tell people I have like the crafting ADHD, right? So if it's creative and crafty, I probably do it or will try it. But mostly I'm a writer. I am a singer-songwriter. I'm an artist. I paint, I draw, I make jewelry. I do narration. I narrate Audible books, and I think those are the main ones that I stick with. You know, I go on little tangents of epoxy making and different things like that. But at my heart, I tell people I'm a renegade artist. That's my deal. I have 2 cats, and they're my world. I love anything with 4 legs. If I thought I would survive it, and maybe even if I thought I wouldn't, I would probably try to pet it. I ride a motorcycle, and I like hiking, and I like spending time in nature.
Oh, I 100% get that, and I have made a fuss of a wolf. So
don't blame you; they're adorable.
Question, Michol, and I've known you for a couple of years now. How is it that you are so expressive? You have found your voice. You have such a strong personality. You have such creativity. How is it that with all of that you have not been able to set boundaries within your relationships, within your life, and across? It's always that's always very interesting for somebody who is honestly has such a developed throat chakra.
Yeah, so I think, sorry, that's my feral cat colony that triggers that. So I think for me, right, the thing is, and that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about defining selfishness and defining needs. What I learned about why I have such a hard time is because I didn't really know what a need was. My sense of what my needs were was so beyond basic that it was very easy to manipulate me as I was growing up. And that's something that's hard for people to admit, especially strong and independent people. You know, we don't like to admit like I was easily manipulated, but I was. And it was because I didn't have a strong definition for selfishness. So it was easy for people to kind of twist things around on me and make me feel selfish because I had that core wound of selfishness and abandonment. And so I think some of it is that core wounds. Some of it is that I grew up taking care of, I was parentized as a child. I grew up taking care of my parent and my grandparents, right? So some of it was entrained, and some of it was just not the way that my brain works. Without a good definition of something, it's easy to warp. And so I had to learn how to really set a good definition that made sense to me, so that I was then able to say, okay, this is what it is to be selfish. And so selfish, by the way, is the definition of selfish is putting your wants over someone else's needs. And that seems very straightforward to a lot of people. I'm sure it is. But for me, that was difficult if you haven't decided what your needs are. So to me, initially, when I first went to therapy, she's like, what are your needs? What are your non-negotiables? And I was like, well, I need to eat and I need to sleep. And I need to eat and sleep and I need a roof over my head. Like, these are my needs. And it was so beyond basic because my brain was so literal that when someone said that to me, I didn't have the framework to say, oh, wait, I need peace. I need joy. I need happiness. I need to be expressive and be able to be creative. Those were needs I didn't even acknowledge that I had, because to me, I was stuck in this core mentality of eat, sleep, roof, right? So I had to not only define selfishness, but what's a need for me, right? And my therapist had to help me kind of expand past to what I originally thought. And I think because I didn't have those definitions and that kind of understanding of life, and because I was so literally minded, it wasn't until then that I realized that, oh, okay, I see.
But I think we've got to realize it's people's understanding of words, because as a child, if I absolutely said I want, I was told I wants don't get. But I was also told if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yes.
And I could not compute the difference. I mean, it was only a very few years ago that it suddenly registered with me, the difference between saying I want and I need to a certain degree, rather than saying I would really like, any chance, please, of asking rather than demanding.
Right.
And it's so when anybody says to me, what do you want? The answer is nothing.
Very similar concept, right? It's a very similar concept. And that was something that probably because you were told from a time you were little, oh, this is, not wants don't get met. And so you're like, oh, okay, well, wait a second. Am I not supposed to want things? And so if you internalize that, I was told I was selfish as a child. So I think I went out of my way to not be selfish. But without that definition of selfish, anyone who I was with or anybody in my life could be like, you're selfish, and it would hurt me. And I would be like, oh, I don't want to be that. So let me do whatever it is they're asking me to do. And that is how my boundaries eroded to a non-existent point until I was like, oh, well, hold on. This is a want and a want. And that's when it gets tricky. Well, what about a want and a want, right? Who's selfish then? Like, you want something, they want something. How do you compare that? And it's kind of like we talked about, Sarah and I, Scott, we're talking about neurodivergence, right? And how people's brains are wired differently, and how like almost everyone we know's brain is wired differently like us. And that's because I think like seeks like, right? So we don't see the other side of that. But I think, to your point, Sarah, because sometimes our brains are wired to be more literal or to be more specific, then we kind of flounder a little bit when we don't have that definition. Okay, what is a want and how is a want met? And then the next step of that is the double standard or that double talk. Like, well, if you don't ask, you won't get it. But then, but don't want things. And now you're telling me two different conflicting things. And my brain doesn't know how to process it because you're telling me two opposing things in my mind, right? There's not a lot of gray room for that. So then you take the safer route if you're a people pleaser.
Absolutely. Scott, your thoughts?
It's interesting because I was reflecting just on my upbringing and being the oldest. And it was always what was best for the family. And I was the oldest. So the standards were much stricter than my 7 years later, my youngest brother. And, he just kind of walked through life and didn't have any of the same rules that I did. And it's interesting how you put that. My needs were, how I define my needs is whatever it is I needed at that moment, but it couldn't be a want. I couldn't want more. And yeah, I understand now how that turned. And in my adult life, as a caregiver and a people pleaser, whatever their needs were more than my wants. Whatever
Yep.
that, as a man of the house, of being a husband, of being a father, it was theirs. Their life was much more important than anything that I had to do. And that's how I defined myself for years and years and years, was what does my family need? Period. There was no inclination of, well, I'd really like to watch the baseball game, but there was so much other things to do, so I'm going to do that. And that, it just never even entered my mind, because then I would be selfish. That's how I would define myself, as you're sitting here doing nothing. You're being selfish when there are things to be done, and therefore other people's needs are not being met.
Yeah.
Interesting the way that thank you for both of you for kind of turning that a couple degrees so that I can look at it differently. By the way, for anybody listening and watching this, these discussions are as much about us and how we see things as it is about for you to hear some of the stories of everybody that is written in the book. It's about finding and constantly questioning and being curious about your life, your perception, your relationships, what you expect of yourself, what others expect of you, and what you can expect from other people. And one of the common things that I've found is boundaries. Boundaries. As people pleasers, we don't really have boundaries, right? Somebody calls, we're off. Yep, that's it. Their needs are more important than ours, no matter what we were doing. Well, I couldn't get around to doing my thing, but they're taken care of, so I'm very, very happy. And so that whole definition of boundary is, and I found that most people don't like boundaries. Oh, that means I'm being mean. If I have a boundary, if I have a wall or a fence up, then I'm just keeping people out and I'm being very mean. Not really. Boundaries are you showing people how they should respect you, how you want to be treated, what your yeses and nos are, and people. What I've found through the years is when you change those boundaries, when you change those parameters, sometimes they don't like it very much. Sometimes people walk away because they're not getting what they want from you. I'll go find somebody else. And while that hurts, it also says something a lot about the relationship and how we see ourselves within the relationship and how that dynamic works. So the question I have is, for you, Michol, is how do you bring, and I know we talked about neurodivergence, so we have many times on the program. How do you bring that and kind of allow, you go with the flow with a lot of things, but then you've had to kind of establish a little bit more solidity to your whole existence, your frame, how you do things, what you do, reframe what is important and what you'll let slide. How has that transition worked for you?
So it's interesting because a lot of that had to do with being able to reframe certain things. So I never really liked, I know, I understand it. Like the boundary example is you always have to take care of yourself. Nobody else is going to take care of you. And the example they always give you is, right, you don't put somebody else's oxygen mask on first, you put yours on first. And for some reason, it never really clicked in my head. So I think it's just finding the right way to phrase it for each individual person. For me, that moment came when I realized somebody said something along the lines to me of, if you are burnt out and you're frustrated because you're burnt out and you snap at other people, then you're not your best, and then you end up hurting other people, right? And since I'm a people pleaser, I stopped and I thought about that for a second, and I was like, oh, okay, so to be my best self and show up for people properly, I need to actually take care of myself, which means that I have to be happy, healthy, and feeding my soul. And when I got certain things happening in my life where I actually had to look at, like, okay, what am I spending time on and what does feed my soul? And that became important to me, because it's not just about your body, right? And so everybody, okay, yep, nope, I ate 3 meals a day and I'm showering and I'm doing all the things. But it's also about your mind, and it's about your spirit, and it's about what feeds your soul, what feeds your mind. If your mind is just constantly stressed out and chaotic, yes, you are then probably going to be more apt to snap at people. So I've told people my example that I give, my personal example for how I know when I'm too far down and I got to take self-care, is I love my cats. They live with me, and they are the only things that live with me. So when they start to irritate me, when I start to feel that like tension where I'm going to get aggravated, I now notice that and take that as a sign that I need to step away. And yes, I know the work needs to get done. And yes, I know that other project needs to get done and the house cleaning needs to get done. But I obviously need to stop and take some time for self-care. So that is a classic example, not using a human, where if you're noticing that someone or something you love is starting to grate on you, then maybe it's not about them, and it's about you taking the time and the space for yourself, right? And saying, oh, I need to step away from this or that person or this job or that whatever for a few minutes and reevaluate and take time for myself. And when I realized that, I realized something else. That my whole life, I had this thing where I thought that if I could just make everybody happy, they would never be frustrated with me. But here I am getting frustrated at my cat, whom I love dearly, and I think he's my soulmate, and I cuddle with him every second of every day, but he still gets frustrated with me. So is it reasonable for me to expect that I can behave in such a manner that no one will ever, ever, ever get mad or frustrated or annoyed with me? And that is at its core part of the problem for all people pleasers setting boundaries. Because what they really want is that love that they've been missing. What they really want is to not be hurt, and that safety that they've been missing. So when people give on their boundaries, it's not because they want to not have boundaries. It's because they want to be safe. And for whatever reason, pushing that boundary means they might be safe because that person won't attack them or won't shun them or won't abandon them. And when they give up on their self-care and they do for their family and they keep taking, they know that they're feeling good. And that can be misleading. I feel good because I'm helping these people. But at the same time, they're not looking at, but I'm draining myself. And this is not a sustainable thing. And at the same time, they're not looking at, okay, but where is this coming from? Is this coming from a place where I feel like I had a lot of abandonment issues as a child. So I know that that's part of my core wounds. But that's part of it. And then the ultra independence. So you said, Scott, earlier, I'm always doing all these things and I come off really strong. But for me, ultra independence is my armor. I don't let anybody close, so I can't be hurt. So it's not necessarily the healthiest boundary for me to have. And I might need to work on that at some point. So not all boundaries are good boundaries.
I would want to sort of amend that a little bit and reframe that when I work with clients. And a lot of them put up a strong, oh, no, I can't have boundaries. I can't. I said, okay. All right, let's not have boundaries. Let's have parameters. Well, what do you mean? I said, well, how about a speed bump? I said, people coming toward you have to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear that thump, thump. And that way you can be alerted that there's something coming. You know, you don't have no boundary, but you do have that little speed bump. So people have to slow down. And that way you can, that little sound can let you know that, okay, they're close and I'm not sure if I want to deal with this or how I want to deal with this. And it seems to work for a lot of people that it, instead of a fence or a wall, it's speed bump. And so
it's a parameter.
It's a, you know, it's kind of sort of a parameter, and we make it work that way so that in the relationship, instead of, you know, the neon light going off in the klaxon, you know, bum, 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 before we get to that point, we have that little bump.
Isn't it funny how semantically things can shift things? So I have a little bit of ODD in my family line, and I don't like that I need to have what they call a routine. So I have reframed it as I have a series of rituals. So sometimes it's just playing around with the semantics and finding a way that your brain processes it to understand that, hey, it's not selfish to take care of yourself. And that's really hard for people pleasers because we've taken care of other people our whole lives. And in some cases, we've been told it's selfish to have wants and needs. So it's trying to find that way to kind of get everybody to understand that you're not selfish just because you're trying to take care of yourself. And that is, I think when I read the title that Sara Jane, I read it and I was like, yes, I'm going to do this. Because it was just, I think that's really something that everybody I know struggles with. Where's the boundary? I like the parameters thing. I will add that to my toolbox of things when I'm talking to people if they seem resistant to the boundary. And it can be hard. And sometimes maybe you start with the parameters and then later you do have a wall, right? There may be some things where you're like, no, hard pass. You cannot treat me this way, speak to me this way. I will not accept that. Mm-hmm. And I would say I eased into that as well. Like I did not, you are correct. I didn't call them parameters, but I did not firmly set boundaries immediately upon learning that I needed them. I tentatively attempted to tiptoe into having boundaries. And then over time, I was able to repeat that because it's fear. When you're first setting boundaries, it's fear. You're afraid. You're scared. Even if you're not sure, even if it comes out as anger, even if it comes out as frustration, you're scared because you don't know that person's response, or maybe you do, and that's why you're afraid. So you kind of have to work your way up. And those baby steps all accumulate to later on having, this is my wall. You cannot speak to me this way or treat me this way without resistance.
I think I went from that sort of people pleaser and learning to sort of to think for me rather than think for others. And it was like, okay, well, the marriage has got to go. And then the job went, but that wasn't me leaving it at that point in time. But it was starting to do things that felt right for me, understanding it. And I don't think I became aware. I hadn't even started this at this point in time. This was the beginning, the very beginning of my journey. And that stepping away from my marriage was almost the green light for the universe. Right, we're going to take the job away. She can move. She can do this. So, in some respects, some would look at it and say, "Your whole world fell apart." But I was the one that broke the marriage up. Mm. When the universe said the job's going, but it got me to where I am in the place I live now, not the house, but the town I live now. But it got me here in the process of that all coming to an end. So when we have the courage to say, no, this isn't working for me, there's going to be changes, because that's what we're doing. So I wasn't aware that it was a boundary I was setting. It was just, I've got to do what's right for me. I never remember anyone saying to me, love yourself. But that is the most important thing for us to do. Because it's not about other people loving us. It's how much love have we got for ourselves? And that quote by Alice Little, and I will repeat this quote time and time again. As a traumatized child, you were desperately waiting for the adult that would come and save you. What you didn't understand was that it would be yourself as an adult. And as your inner child feels loved by, seen by you, listened to by you, heard by you, your child starts to relax, to become happier, to feel seen, heard, and loved. And as your child becomes happier, that seeps up into the adult of today. So I started setting boundaries without realizing that is what I was doing. It was about the care of me. It was about what's right for me. Staying in my marriage was not right for me. Actually, that job going was absolutely a real gift to me. And everything that happened, I can look at everything that happened in the way it happened, even to the house that I bought, and the fact that I then took redundancy and walked into a new job 6 days later. All of these things happened because I had the courage to participate in the process of what's right for me. And one of the things, as I started further down the line of understanding with the Reiki and the energy techniques, etc., was by constantly saying yes to everybody else. And we now know that when you say yes to others, you're saying no to yourself. When you're constantly saying yes to others, you're holding two people back. You're holding the individual back you're forever saying yes to, because you're not encouraging them to do things for themselves, to learn and grow for themselves. And you're holding yourself back, because while you're doing for others, you can't be doing for yourself. And just a little add on the X, we are not here to be doings, we're here to be beings. And when you're constantly doing, you're not being. I would like to add something else here. At the very beginning, we were using those words want and need, and they were really strongly used. When we use the I am, the I, if we put I want, so if you put that word want or you put that word need after the I, all you're going to get is the wanting and the needing. Whereas when you choose, you can require it, you can ask for it, but think about your terminology, your phraseology, especially when you use it with the I. So, I want more money. You're going to be left with wanting more money. I want more love. Well, unless you're going to actually find it within yourself, you are going to be left wanting that. I need this. Get away from the words want and need. And I know people understand them, but I think it's about, can we rephrase these things so that we are not in this want and need so much as, what are my requirements for, and what do I choose to help make my life better and happier and more comfortable and more healthy for me, so that I can then be there in that better place, as you've been talking about, that better place to support others. Because at the end of the day, I really do feel I'm here to support others, but I'm here to help them to do things for themselves. I'm not here to do it for them. So there's some thoughts for you.
That was quite a lot.
Sorry.
That was quite a lot there. So if I can jump on to what you were saying about how we rephrase it. And talk to people, and it's, when you don't have money, it's very easy to say, I need more money.
Yeah.
I want more money. I need to have it. And I found that relationship with money, with value, with all of that, really frames. It depends on how and who you see yourself as. And it was when I changed that phraseology to, I would like to live in more abundance. I would like to live in an abundant life. I get to live an abundant life, however that shows up. And all of a sudden, a lot of the tension of demands that I had, oh, you need to do this and you need to do that, all of a sudden it just kind of faded. And for me, it took the tension in most of my young adult life. I worked 2 and 3 jobs because I could never make enough money, and raising a family and doing all of that. But now I'm at the point where I get to choose what I want to do. I get to choose how I spend my time. I get to. And it is that perspective of gratitude, that perspective of just being full of in life, being present in life. And we all, no matter what modality anybody talks about, no matter what that is, they all come down to the same exact thing, right? Being present. How do you do that? How do you get there? What does it mean? And no matter how you do it, you just come to that place in your heart right here. And that vision of who you were the reason you came in this world. I went to India, I went to Peru, I've gone to different places where they phrase it differently. But it all comes down to being grateful to be here. You were invited here as a soul. You are living in this male-female costume that we have on, and we are enjoying life. And that fear that we've carried and what was inputted into us by our parents, well, you can't do that because you might fail at it. But you know what? I've learned that I can fail at a lot of things. And I'm still whole. It doesn't diminish me. It doesn't diminish who I am. But I learned so much from it. And I get to experience all of those things. It's like taking a job and you absolutely hate it. But out of it, I always say, you learn things. What I won't do again, those things I don't want to do, and the things that it clarifies what you do want to do. And Sara Jane has brilliantly guided me through these interviews, and I get to meet some of the most incredible people in the world. She is a gatherer of human beings. She collects people, and from all over the world, and we get to interview people that are just so stunningly creative and living their own lives and living so differently. And it's just brilliant the way that she has been able to put people together. And with this book and how she phrased the title of the book, everybody who wrote in it said, yes, that's me. Yes, absolutely. Because we could relate to that, because that's how we lived most of our life. And coming out of that is that transition from feeling selfish because I need to do something for me in order to feel whole, to being that person who is present and whole standing in front of you. And I think we all know when we see somebody who is very, very clearly comfortable in their skin. They are comfortable in who they are. They're comfortable in what they do. And you see it, you feel it, you know it. They have that energy. And that's where I believe that most people want to get to. Mm-hmm. And that's how I try to help guide people, allow them to feel that. Michol, you were saying that, you weren't sure where you should be or how you should put a boundary and where you should put it. And how it should be, but you knew you didn't want to be selfish because you were told selfish was bad, and so therefore you needed to be good. But in order to be good, you needed to satisfy other people rather than satisfy any need of yourself. Did you know in doing all that and kind of emptying yourself? You said your cup wasn't empty, your cup was broken, and you couldn't hold anything there. Had you felt what true joy was, what true presence was with a broken cup, and how did you piece that together so you could hold that?
So that is a great question. And I'll really quick, we'll address, so Sara Jane just beautifully gave us an example of how semantics works differently for different folks, right? So for her, she doesn't like the want and need. She doesn't, that doesn't work for her. For me, I needed to have a definition for want or need, or I would never be able to set boundaries because I needed the definition set in my head so that I knew what was what. And so that semantics and finding that verbiage that's right with you. And from a manifesting perspective, she's absolutely correct. You do not want to say, I want. You want it to be, right? You want it to exist. You want it to be part of you. And then as far as being present, right, that's been a struggle for me until I realized that, well, a lot of the pain I'm feeling comes from living in the past or living in the future and not being in the present. So trying to just remind myself of that. That said, I think, Scott, your question is, I just had this conversation, and it's so funny the way all of these divine timings happen, right? Like I just had this conversation with someone. I realized that I had always fit myself around whomever I was with, right? I would change and morph into whoever I was with, whatever people I was with. And I had said to my father when I was a teenager, I don't know how to act. And he said, well, that's the problem, daughter. You don't act, just be yourself. And my brain could not compute what he was saying to me because my whole life, like you said, I didn't know. My whole life being me was making sure other people were happy so that I was a good person, so that I was good and that I wouldn't be called bad and that I wouldn't be hurt and that I wouldn't be, kind of shunned. And I think that it was hard. I honestly only just realized that tidbit recently in my life. I was like, oh my goodness, I really do. It's a blessing and a curse. It's great that I can fit in with lots of different types of people, but you shouldn't want or feel, let's see how I can rephrase this. You shouldn't feel as though it's necessary for you to change the core of who you are to fit somewhere. That if you feel that need, and you feel anxious about it, then maybe those aren't your people. And I think for me, what I started to realize when I started to set boundaries, I started to realize that simple things to other people were big things for me sometimes. And that's okay, because I'm wired that way. So when somebody would be like, are you coming to this birthday party? Initially, I would be like, oh, I have to go. I'm obligated to go. If I don't go, I'm a bad sister, cousin, aunt, uncle, whatever, right? Like if I don't go to this party, but I don't have it in me and I'm just going to be grumpy and miserable and I'm going to plaster a smile on my face and mask through the whole thing and no one's going to know, but somebody might say something and I might snap, right? So learning that, okay, I'm mentally not in a place to go to this. And learning how to be self-aware was the key to my boundaries. When I finally started to learn how to define them, I had to be aware, how does this impact me? How will this negatively impact me if I go? And then recognizing that my mental health was the most important thing, right? Like if I am going to be falling apart, if I'm going to be a mess, or in the reverse, I had a funeral for a friend recently. I knew if I didn't go, I was not going to be okay with that. And that was a one-time thing. So yes, financially it was a little tough, but I had to pay attention to what was inside me. And when I started to do that, it was easier for me to say, okay, this is a boundary, right? This is a boundary. My boundary is, if my mental health feels like it will suffer, I'm not going to do it. And that's boundaries for myself, not necessarily for other people. And and you have to kind of make agreements with yourself. Like, people are going to get mad when you set boundaries. They're not always going to understand, I'm not mentally capable of coming to that today. That's an internal thing. Nobody sees that happening. They don't know what all is going on in your life. They don't know what other things. They don't know, whatever, X, Y, and Z. So being able to be okay with that also, again, takes bravery, because you might upset people. But I will say this. Most of the time, if you have surrounded yourself with decent people, even if they're mad at you for a little while, they're not going to be mad at you forever. And that, I think, is the core fear of most of the people pleasers that I know. Like, they're going to leave me forever and hate me forever if I don't go do this thing. But I'll give you a mundane example. My brother was living with me, and we made an agreement that he doesn't like passive aggressive. We sat down, we talked about our communication styles and our different needs and what we like and what we don't like. So just likes, not even wants or needs, right? Just things we like, don't like. What do we like? What do we not like, right? And I was talking with someone about the trash. That was one of his chores. So he would let it go until it was like overflowing. And I would watch it pile and pile and pile. And I would get mad and mad and mad and mad. And the person I was talking to was like, let me ask you this. How long would you be mad if you just said, hey, can you take this out? And I was like, I don't know, like 15 seconds. She was like, but you just waited 3 days to say something. So why would you wait 3 days to say something than just say, hey, whatever. And I was like, well, because he might get aggravated at me. I don't want to be a nag. I don't want to be blah, 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 blah. It's the people pleaser again. But then I realized that it took 15 seconds. He might have been annoyed that I asked him to do it in a time he didn't want to do it, but he recognized that it needed to be done. And 15 seconds later, we're back to being who we were and being loving and caring brother and sister, right? So it's a mundane example of how holding things inside, which is also a staple of the people pleaser, can be more detrimental than if you just say, I use a lot of I statements now. I use a ton of I statements. I don't feel appreciated. I actually said this out loud to someone 2 months ago. I said, I don't feel like I am appreciated or valued unless I am giving you something of value. And I don't like that. Because that is part of us as people pleasers, right? We provide value to everybody else. And of course they love us because we're doing everything for them. But will they love us when we're not? Will they love us when we're the ones that need the care? Will they love us when we're the ones that have the surgery? And only you can answer those questions. But for me, that became a wake-up call to take stock in the people that I had around me. Because if they wouldn't, then why are we there? It should always be a symbiotic relationship. I don't expect anyone in my life to do anything for me that I would not do for them, and vice versa, right? And so it should always be symbiotic. So why would you always be the one going over and doing X, Y, and Z? And would that person, if you had surgery, gosh forbid, would they show up? Would you have people to care for you like you care for other people? And just starting to just be aware. Just all starts with awareness. If you can just start with awareness, oh, I don't like that. That makes me feel this way. And then that can give birth to a parameter that can give birth to a boundary later.
Seriously, there are 2 or 3 of the comments below the video that I put up, which has had over 102,000 hits. Some of the comments were, I did everything for everybody, but when I needed help, there was absolutely nobody there for me. And that's because it's exactly what you were saying. They were happy to use that individual, but once that individual was of no use to them and actually required them to support that person, they weren't there. And I remember, won't go into the actual situation, but I do remember saying no to my mother. And she did not appreciate it for this particular thing that I said no. And I was very firm about it. I'd made an offer. She tried to change the parameters of that offer. And I said, no, we won't do it then. It did not sit well with me, so I wasn't going to do it. And I wasn't very popular to start with. But what it's done within the family is help the others realize they have permission to say no. And so it's don't be afraid. As you say, please, will you take the trash out? Sort of, if we do these things, we give others permission to do the same. So if there's something that you were meant to be doing and your brother gives him permission to say to you, please, why don't we just do that for each other?
That's a good question. I'm curious. You touched on this earlier, and I'm curious from both of you. Do you see a strong tie? Because I have seen it between people pleasing and enabling. And a lot of people discount that. But when you people please, often I have seen the people pleasers have become enablers. And you're kind of teaching people how to treat you and what's acceptable and not acceptable. But also you might be teaching them that they can't do it themselves by not letting. And when Scott, you talked about failure, you have to fail to build confidence. So if you never fail, you'll never build confidence. So I don't know. I guess I'm kind of curious what you guys think about the link between people pleasing and enabling and kind of stealing that opportunity for confidence away maybe from people.
So one leads to the other. People pleasing as a young child, where you morph yourself into what that you think needs to be done for that time, to be able not to be yelled at, to be able to be pleased, that love is given conditionally because you have done the right thing. You then turn into enabling other people not to do what they need to do for themselves. Many, many times. I talk about my daughters, and being a dad of daughters, I always wanted to be there to protect them. So whenever they called, I was right there. Whenever they needed me, right there. I tried to raise them so that they were independent financially, spiritually, physically, mentally, in every single way that they could, so that when they get to the point in their life, they could share themselves with somebody, but as an equal, and not they didn't attach themselves to somebody. They would share that with somebody. As my daughters got married, my daughter who lives down in DC, she would have a list for me to do when I came to visit. Now, I love to do things and I love to fix things, and she kind of knew that. But her husband didn't know how to pick up which end of the hammer. He wasn't quite sure. So I would do that, and I enabled that to happen. And my daughter who lives here, and I would, whenever she needed something, before asking anybody else, she would ask me. Before her husband, before her kids, she would ask me. And so I enabled that to happen, and I continued that. It changed the relationship, changed the dynamic when I started not offering. When they would say, well, I really need to do this, and I really need to do that, and, I could use some money for this, and I would say nothing. And there'd be a prolonged silence. And I'd say, well, I'm sure you'll figure a way out. And what I found is that they found ways to do the things themselves, and they actually grew in their independence
from that,
from young adults older. Initially, I enabled that reliance And then I realized they really did. I didn't raise them so they'd be reliant on me. I really didn't want that. I didn't want them relying on somebody else, that they could be independent, fully independent. And then here I was turning around and doing the exact opposite of what I wanted. So when that went up, it's taken quite a while in order to reestablish the relationship, because Dad always did before, and so you've changed. No, I haven't changed. I just don't offer it the way I normally do. And by the way, your cat is much like mine. Always wants to be. I was writing last night, walked across the keyboard, and wanted to write apparently her own story. And so she didn't. I didn't lose anything, but it got a little tough. But anytime I do energy work in the house, the cat is always right there. They are so sensitive to energy, to all of that. And
yeah. And I can't keep him out of the room or you'll hear him. So it's either you see him or you're going to hear him. And so I thought better to leave him in the room where you can see him and he's not quite as vocal.
No, I had cats for years. The last one went 5 weeks before his 21st birthday. So sort of, yeah, but yeah, absolutely. Across the keyboard if you're trying to read. That sort of, yeah. I think this goes back to what I was saying about if you're always doing for other people, you're holding two people back.
Mm-hmm.
And you get work situations. It's not just family situations, is it? It's work situations. That one person who's always coming up to you and saying, "Can you do this?" It's the same thing every time. How often have they been shown to do it? But one of the other things they say certainly within anything, if you're showing somebody how to do something, you're realizing just how much you know yourself.
That's true.
So if you're in that situation where somebody's constantly asking you to do something, and I've worked with adults with learning difficulties, and it's having the patience every single time to support them to do it for themselves. Not to it's easier to do it for them. It doesn't help them to grow. It doesn't help them to learn. And it doesn't help them to feel worth anything.
Mm-hmm.
If you're constantly doing for them. And so it's finding a way of, okay, I know I've shown you this before. Let's sit down. Whoa, let's hope we get Scott back. Let's sit down. And I'll show you one more time. And then if they come again, it's just like, right, I've shown you. You've taken the notes. I've asked you to take notes as to how to do it. Because I'm one of these people who has to take very specific notes.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember. If somebody goes, blah, 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 it's gone out of my head, and I'm not there at all. So it's very much a matter of, right, I'm sitting here. You've got your notes. You do it. I'll just be here to watch you. So you have to take the time to support people to do it for themselves. Then hopefully they'll stop asking.
Well, that's the teach a man to fish mentality, right? Like we've heard that as a young child. Well, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach a man a fish, he can eat anytime he wants to. And isn't it funny how in our professional lives, we will train somebody and we will take the time to say, this is how you do this. And some people, even some people pleasers, I know they have boundaries at work, but they just lack them everywhere else. And then some don't have them anywhere. I just caught myself today. I am the savior. Everyone comes to me with their most difficult problem and I will fix it and find the solution for it. But what I learned is that if you wait, so this is what I call power in the pause. It's the power in the pause. If you just wait, somebody says, I don't know how to do this, and you just wait. And sometimes you wait a day or two or however long is appropriate for that particular thing. And hey, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that right now because I have something else going on, right? And you just give them the freedom to try to figure it out themselves, and they do, And so how often, though, have we been like, let me help you right away? And how often did we not need to do that? Because they would have figured it out if we didn't. And that's kind of why I was curious what you guys thought about the, the tie between the enabling, because I've certainly seen it in my own family. And I kind of heard some precursors when we were talking. So I was like, oh, I want to see what everybody else thinks about it. So I love that. And it gives everybody that's listening kind of the idea that, hey, maybe that's another self-awareness thing where you might realize it later. You might be listening to this and be like, oh, I am the one that always is like, let me fix that. Let me help you. Oh, you need that? I'll do it right now. And maybe instead you can be, oh, well, I sometimes will tell people how I find the answer, right? Oh, if it were me, it's always if it were me. I use a lot of I statements even when I'm helping people. If it were me, I would do this and this and this. And then, see if they can help. Of course, I will help if they get stuck. But it's interesting how it can sometimes differ from our professional lives to our actual, personal lives, though.
Yeah, the pause is a big thing.
Yeah. Yep, the power in the pause. It's even true for narrating. It's true for songwriting. It's true for boundaries. It's true for teaching people and enabling. So, power of the pause.
Absolutely. We're coming very close to the end of the program. And I'd like to sort of say, please, is there anything just little before we finish that you would like to share? So we'll come to you first, Michol.
Oh, no, first. I would just say, it all starts really with self-awareness, and it all starts with finding a way to frame things, as you've seen even just here with us, that works for you. And having needs is not a bad thing. Or if you want to call them non-negotiables, I've heard them phrased that way. What are your non-negotiables? What are the things that you will not accept? What are your parameters? I like that one. I'm going to use that a lot now. What are your parameters that keep you in a happy, healthy mindset? And just remember that your mental health is something that does require and does deserve your attention, and your needs and wants for that are important. So I would say, be mindful of that. Other people don't have to understand what it is that is your parameter for your mental health. That's deeply personal for you, and you're the only one who can protect it because it's your mind.
Beautifully stated. I want to say to everybody out there that selfish is and depends on how you define it and how you were taught what selfish means. Mm-hmm. Find where that line is for you now. Don't define it as when you were an 8-year-old or a 13-year-old or even a 21-year-old. Define where that line is now for you, so that you can maintain happy, healthy, joyful, enriched life, and work on it every day.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to add to that if somebody actually refers to you as being selfish because you've said no, who is truly the selfish one? Because if you've said no because it doesn't resonate, it doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel right, you can't do it because other things going on. You can't just drop your life for that person. So but you don't have to give a reason. No is all you have to say. And if somebody calls you selfish for not doing what they want, regardless of what feels right for you, it's not you that's being selfish. They are just projecting onto you how they are. And so if you can get your head round that you aren't actually being selfish, you're protecting yourself and you're honoring yourself, that isn't selfish. That's what we're here to do. And we can bring so much more to the people we're meant to if we take care of our energies. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I am so sorry we didn't have Chessie. It would have curtailed some of our conversation, but I'm sure she could have added so much. I'm sure she could have added more to it, because, and I'm sure she won't mind me saying this, because she has the neurodivergent issues that so many people have these days. Yeah. And so being able to speak in a program and be open to the fact that we see things differently, we understand things differently, we cope with things differently is so important. And it's being able to understand that, being open to somebody saying, I don't understand that, or that word does not mean that to me, sort of, can you rephrase it so that I can understand it? It's being able to do that. And so I'm sorry Chessie wasn't with us. We will bring Chessie on at some stage, but if with the problem she's having, we might have to do a one-on-one with me. But I will bring her back. I will. So thank you to you, Michol. Thank you to Scott. Thank you to those of you that watch this program. I really hope that you get something from it. I will put Michol, Scott's and myself's website addresses under the video on YouTube. Michol's is right here in the chat. LadyMayimpressions.com. So if you wish to learn anything more about the works that any of us do, check out our websites, and feel free to contact us through our contact pages. Next week, I am being joined by Wendy Vigdor-Hess, and we're going to be talking about awakening to self-love. So if that speaks to you, I hope you'll join us. Take care, be safe, stay well. See you soon. Namaste, sweet souls.
Namaste.